Like the Real Housewives of Max Verstappen up in here.
Checo's checked out.
Joe Gonyu is off the track. That steak is cooked.
I gotta say, a lot is at stake for Steak F1.
Man, even the broadcast couldn't handle that stat.
Man, my heart almost was screaming like, how can anybody be a Lewis Hamilton fan?
No.
Not on my 2024 bingo card.
Yeah, you're gonna have to create a new one now.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Lights Out Latest. My name is Marina, and I'm here with my fellow Formula One fans and friends, Jason, Tristan, and Steven. And today we're going to talk all things Japanese Grand Prix and Suzuka. But before we do that, let's get into some of the headlines. Liberty Media, like we talked about last week, officially bought MotoGP for 3.5 billion euros or $4.5 billion. That's crazy.
Big money.
Awesome. That's so cool. I mean, of course, I think we all hope that someday MotoGP will get to the same level as F1.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll ever get there, but I would love to see it get close. And, you know, I think under this new management, they could have a huge thing going for them. And something I think we actually didn't mention last time that I think goes under the radar is they have, like, their marquee driver, Alexander Rossi. Or is it Valentino Rossi?
Valentino Rossi.
Alexander's in
IndyCar.
Yeah.
He was in F1 for a little bit.
He's struggling in IndyCar, but you know.
Yeah.
My 10 cents is I think we're in this world right now where there's a lot of, I'm sure you guys see it on social media too, where there's a lot, the biking community is really strong in terms of like the super bikes and like people getting on like obviously the Kawasaki Ninjas and just flooring it on the highway.
Oh, yeah.
And I think if I'm Liberty Media and I acquire MotoGP, that's where a disconnect has been because I'm going to use NASCAR as an example, but like a lot of the guys down south that love to work on their cars, like stuff like that, they're NASCAR fans. Like inherently they like motorsports. And I think that's a home for a lot of these people that are like into the biking community right now that are like, yeah, like doing meetups and stuff. Like if Liberty Media can somehow capitalize on getting those people to become MotoGP fans, like
100%.
that would be really cool.
Yeah,
because I think that's MotoGP's struggle. Is like I'm not a big motorcycle fan. Like I don't love how they race. It's just not. It's very scary. First of all, but that's not like
that's why I don't watch it continuously. Is like F1 is scary, and we'll talk about more about that later on this episode with everything, but. F1 is scary. MotoGP is scarier.
Yeah.
It's just so scary.
That, like when you go around a corner, your knee is legit just scraping.
Yeah.
It's like
it gives me chills. I can't. It's
like
too much.
just one slip and you're whoosh.
Yeah. The fear factor is like I would honestly argue one of the biggest draws for sure. Like I don't know. Again, I'm sure there's gonna be one or two MotoGP fans that are gonna see this and be like, these freaking idiots, dude. They don't get it.
The thing I'll say is though, you kind of touched on it there. It's kind of like the same. Extreme factor, I guess you could call it, as like rally car racing.
That's a good one. Yeah. But rally car is so much more relatable, if that makes sense, because it's four wheels.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just a four-wheel fan.
Yeah.
Like that's just how I go.
It's a niche. I'll say that. I mean, I don't. There's not a lot of times I feel like you're into both. You know.
Yeah.
I feel like if you have a bike, you're kind of a bike guy, and if you have a car, you're kind of a car guy.
But I think looking at the four of us, though, we're motorsports fans, and I think we can all appreciate MotoGP for what it is.
For sure.
You know
for
what
sure.
I mean?
Like I've watched a couple races. I've not completely, like I've seen them. Also bought the MotoGP game, and I tried to figure that out. I never got really good, but I remember doing so many laps at Mugello, just trying to figure out the lean, figure out the physics and the lines. Because like in the game, it's not just steering; it's like leaning into the corner, and then not pulling the throttle too much that you like pop a wheelie and lose traction.
That's probably an underrated factor of MotoGP, honestly.
It's so much like balancing on two wheels is such a different skill set than racing on four.
Right.
I think that's where the disconnect is too, because we talk about like we're all motorsports fans, and so like I think it's relatively simple for you to go from NASCAR to F1, IndyCar, Formula E. They're all four wheels. And even like we've seen drivers go between those sports, but you will probably never see an F1 driver drive in MotoGP. I don't know that it's ever happened. I don't think it ever will.
Yeah. There's only one that came close, Valentino Rossi.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
He was magical. He had a test with Ferrari in like 2007, right after Schumacher left. And apparently his lap times are good enough that they're willing to get him a drive somewhere in F1. And he didn't take it because he was just killing it in MotoGP. He's like, why take a risk now when I'm at the pinnacle of my sport and I became an all-time legend in it? It'd literally be like Lewis Hamilton taking a test on a MotoGP bike, doing pretty good, and saying, you know what, maybe I'll go over there. Well, actually, bad analogy. Valentino was in the middle of his like hot streak. So maybe, like, it would be like Max leaving now to go to MotoGP. Yeah. It would be like you got so many more to win. Why leave now?
Yeah. The thing is, I mean, he competes in IMSA, right? Or is it WRC? Or
WEC, yeah. He's in GT cars now. And he does good. Like, he's fast. Like, he's in the insane.
Yeah, because I realized he retired, I think, like, literally like 2 years ago.
From MotoGP,
Yeah, from MotoGP,
Oh, okay. Well, hey, now I can go to F1, right?
Yeah. Well, how old is he? He's got to be in his like 40s now.
He should do the Indy 500.
Yeah, something like that.
That would be awesome.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the biggest thing is there's kind of two questions that are still looming. And it's the first one being, how is Liberty Media going to choose to integrate this into Formula One, if at all? Like, are they going to do these kind of things where it's like maybe once in a blue moon you have like a weekend together? Something like maybe in Coda, for example, where it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's pretty relatively simple to like build another support paddock, for example. And the other thing being, I think it's still pending with the European Commission and like in the idea that like antitrust laws and how that kind of works and like monopolization being that like you basically now own two racing series. How does that like affect it all? So
yeah, you're spot on with that because this actually happened. The previous owners of Formula One, CVC Capital, because they co-owned it with Bernie before Liberty Media bought the whole thing. They owned and were forced to sell MotoGP, if I'm not mistaken, because the European courts said, you own two of the top racing series, this is way too big, and they slapped him with the antitrust law, and CVC chose to sell off MotoGP.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, but as you said, it would be cool to see an integrated weekend, but I think it would be too much. Like, you have two top series, and it's like now you're presenting the idea of like, who's the support series?
Yes. Is MotoGP, like, technically speaking, and I think we can all say that MotoGP in that scenario is the support series. But it is such a big series in its own right. It would be like having IndyCar or NASCAR on the same weekend as F1 at the same place. Like, it just doesn't fully fit and make sense. But anyways, moving on, Kimi Antonelli is set to do a 2-day test with Mercedes in Austria on the 16th. What I think is interesting about this is that he's going to be racing the 2021 car and not the new spec car, which to me doesn't make too much sense.
That's actually a regulation.
No, there's a new like they can test in regulation cars now.
I thought it was 2 years old.
I think that's a new...
Yeah. So, like, he could do the 2022 car, which is of this regulation set.
That's what I think. So,
but you can't do 2023.
What I think is interesting is, I guess in a sense it makes sense. Like, if he comes in, say, 26, you're going to be in a whole new regulation. And compared to 2022, I think Mercedes have gone a completely different way. So, it's not like it's going to be extremely helpful to test a slow 2022 car. But still, like, that's a completely new set of regs that he's testing. I feel like it's not really representative as to how that's going.
Yeah. So, like, why is that, though? Like, why is that regulation in place?
So you can't do extra testing on the cars.
Yeah.
Because otherwise,
like
then you could...
Yeah, because then like Red Bull could slap last year's, because they didn't make any drastic changes as of yet. They're looking to potentially do the zero side pod ideas, which if they were able to pull off, and Mercedes weren't, would be really funny. But if they wanted to go, like, they haven't made huge steps, so they could go and grab the 2022 car and just switch it up, like
even just doing
new
setup
stuff,
runs,
new setup
like
stuff, exactly.
Just changing setup.
Yeah, especially at Austria, right? Which is eventually they're going to race in Austria at some point this year. So you're testing the track too at that point.
They own the track. Ferrari, I think they still own part of Imola. Ferrari. So
I think so.
Then it would allow Ferrari to do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So like all not good.
Yeah. Well, kind of moving on. Actually, kind of talking about 2021 a little bit. Lewis Hamilton did a GQ article, and then he talked about, he was asked whether or not he felt that Abu Dhabi 2021 was robbed from him. He goes, was I robbed? Obviously. I mean, you know the story. But I think what was really beautiful in that moment, which I take away from it, was my dad with me, and the day that it hurt the most, he was there. And the way he raised me was always stand up and keep your head up. I obviously went to congratulate Max and not realizing the impact that would have. But I really am conscious of, like, it's a mini me watching. I was definitely conscious of the next 50 meters. and I walk is where I fall to the ground and die and rise up. I don't know.
Hey, why does this guy have to get poetic like
okay.
that?
Here's my issue with this. He's literally talking about how millions of people, and specifically young people, young fans, are watching him.
Yeah.
Yet he continuously brings up Abu Dhabi 2021 in the media. Can it still hurt? Obviously.
Absolutely.
It's still going to hurt. It's still going to be painful. But why are you still continuously bringing it up in the media? You're not letting your own fans.
He was asked about it.
Well, yeah, he was asked the question. I mean, what does he be like? No, I don't want to answer that.
I mean, yeah, you could.
But he obviously has proof of, like, he could say, I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Not he say. Like before the interview even started, and people do that.
Yeah.
Like being in PR, like you go into it and you're like, you can't ask him about this.
Yeah.
And that's a PR manager's job. It's an agent's job to say, we're not talking about this in this interview.
I'm kind of curious why his agent didn't step in and say that, honestly. But I mean,
it's so far away. Like it's been what, 3 years, almost 3 years now.
I mean, but it happened.
Yeah,
I would respond to it. Like, if something like that happened to me, I would say I'm not afraid to speak about it.
Yeah.
Like, you need to shine a light on these things so they don't happen again.
I think from the fans' perspective, people need to realize this isn't a Max Verstappen versus Lewis Hamilton argument. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No.
This is Lewis Hamilton versus authority, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
like,
this is the FIA, F1 versus Lewis.
How does that song go? Because I fought the law and the law won. Like, that's literally like, that's what's happening.
No,
he's just mad that what should have happened didn't, and he's not mad at Max. Like, that's because from the fans' perspective, that's what some people still think. They're like, oh no, he hates Max. Like,
he doesn't. He
no.
Yeah.
Well, Marina, I know we were talking about this a couple of days ago. I think the best thing for him to do, and I think you kind of touched on it, I think if it were me, I would just be up there and be like, we talked about this enough. I don't really talk about it anymore. And then I would be like, well, I'm just going to go out there and win that championship and prove everyone wrong. I think that's the best thing you can do.
And
just prove them wrong.
It's not me saying that I don't think that that he can't have feelings about it.
No,
Obviously, he's going to have feelings about it. My whole point just is that, and he talks about it in a way that it was like, that was a big moment for me to show my fans how you should act in a moment like this.
Yeah.
And then following those events, he was very quiet for a long time. And now 2-3 years later, he's bringing it all back.
Yeah.
And yes, every year on the date of Abu Dhabi 2021, around that race, you're going to bring it all up again. Yeah. It's always going to happen.
Yeah.
It is. It's natural. Fans are still curious about it. They still want to know. Some people, myself included, still don't understand 100% what happened. We don't have a timeline where it's like, and we don't know, was that intentional? Was it not? Was he just, so it's still very much, I guess, debated, and it's like you said, it's still very much Lewis Hamilton versus Max Verstappen fans, which I think is wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
But as a Max Verstappen fan, I can't really say that.
Well, the thing I'll say is, too, I think they should just have a big old 30 for 30 on this, go super far in depth into it, and then we could all just run to the sunset about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like,
I like how poetic that was.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, let's move to another team, the RBs. An F1 article recently said that Liam Lawson was essentially promised a 202025 seat.
We have the meats.
I did see that.
I say that again. The RBs.
We have the meats.
RBs.
Oh my god.
We have the meats?
Sorry.
Question mark?
Why is everything in this podcast we always end up talking about meat in some way, shape, or form? Steak, steak F1 team. Oh, they were really cooked or something.
Well, they were
we
this
love
weekend,
our meat.
Let them cook.
We love the meats.
Let them
cook.
Anyways, I thought I liked seeing this because I kind of said it, and I think if we go back 20 podcast episodes, you probably heard me say it at some point where it was like, I legitimately had a feeling that they told him something along the lines of maybe not promised, but saying, we can't give you the seat right now. You know, not only the public image of Danny Ricciardo, but Yuki is doing well. Yuki beat you. But for 2025, stay here. We've got you. You're going to be on the grid.
Yeah.
That was how I felt when he got out of the car. He just kind of didn't have that thing where it's like, this is my last F1 race, in my opinion. He kind of seemed more chill about it. So I don't know.
When did what's his name get kicked out of the car last year?
Liam?
No.
DeVries.
DeVries. What race?
Like halfway through, right?
It was
Summer break.
like
Like
halfway?
after Baku?
Before the summer break.
Okay, well he's got till then. No, just kidding.
I mean, it might happen.
Legitimately, Danny Ricciardo needs to step up his game.
Oh yeah,
because-
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I mean, this is bringing me flashbacks back to like 2018 when Toro Rosso did like the double swap, and then Gasly got demoted and Albon got promoted in the year after. Like, oh my gosh, it was
It's gonna be
insane
wild, man.
seeing the ruthlessness that is Helmut
Cutthroat.
Marko
Oh God,
in
yeah.
the Red Bull
Well,
system.
the thing, of course, is with it as well is that Danny Ricciardo is so loved in the sport.
Yeah.
That, I mean, I would just thinking about it, like him leaving the sport is just like heartbreaking, honestly.
Yeah.
You know?
100%. Well,
Red Bull will keep him on as like their
social media.
cheerleader.
Yeah, cheerleader.
Honestly,
yeah.
you do show car runs.
Well,
and that'll be it.
You'd be an
Well, that's
awesome
what-
like
that's
media
what
guy.
David
I want to see him
Coulthard
in
does.
IndyCar.
David
but
Coulthard is doing
he doesn't like it.
Isn't he doing a show run in Pennsylvania this week?
What?
Who, Danny?
Really?
David Coulthard
Whoa, whoa,
For
whoa.
what?
We might have to
in one of
trip
the
it out.
older Red
Oh,
Bulls.
boy.
I'm pretty sure I saw this on TikTok, so maybe this
Pennsylvania.
isn't like the best source, but I definitely saw that. And
It's all Chinese propaganda.
Well, we did see the 2023 Red Bull car going down the the Potomac in Washington D.C.
yes, I did see that.
Did see that. We still don't know like what that was for, right? Like it just was it just cause or
I don't know.
I thought there was some reason
Just a
behind
Sunday
it. Like,
drive, you know.
You're
Yeah,
almost
so-
right. It's Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington.
oh, there you
DC.
see, yeah, there you go.
There we go.
There we go, full
Okay.
circle.
Okay.
We're good.
Well, I was close enough. Anyways,
You know, that's
not
fair.
that any of us are gonna go see that anyways, but
I mean,
that's
we
cool.
could
Good.
That's in Washington. It's right in it's literally the White House.
haul
I
it
mean,
down there.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's
Anyways,
like a 3-hour drive.
Do you think
Uh,
Joe Biden's an F1 fan?
I don't think so.
Well, he likes his Mustangs, man. So I don't know.
That'd be funny.
He's
I
a
don't
big
know.
fan of
He's
those.
just a big old Max Verstappen fan.
That's crazy.
Anyways, one last headline, and this kind of relates back to what we'll talk about with like the only big notable thing for Thursday's free practice. Will Buxton confirmed that Williams are not the only team on the grid to have only have the one chassis, not
Yeah.
having a second one. He also confirmed, which was one thing that kind of, I said this in our group chat, was kind of pissed me off just a smidge. I understand it, still don't think it's fair, is that Alex is racing, he's still racing Logan's car, or Logan's chassis, where Logan now has Alex's repaired chassis, which is once again, now Logan's chassis is kaput, which we'll talk about in a bit.
Yeah.
So
Oh, wow.
yeah, so I have a question, right?
Yes.
If that chassis has like catastrophic damage to it, right? Is Williams like in trouble of fielding two cars
Yes,
every
absolutely.
race now?
Absolutely.
That's crazy.
Until Miami, until like next race, it's still like up in the air whether or not they're even going to have two cars next race. Because
man.
and we'll talk about this when we get to the race, but with that crash,
Yeah.
lap one crash, they did have chassis damage on Alex Albon's car, which means now they have two cars that have chassis damage. I'm almost happy for them that it wasn't Logan who crashed with Alex's old chassis, because if that had
Yeah,
crashed
that would've been
again,
bad.
it's gone. There's no saving that chassis, I think. But I don't think it's fair.
And the
that
chassis
Logan has
is
to
an
break, has
underrated
to-
thing. Most
Yeah.
people don't think about it, but like these cracked chassis or flexible chassis like makes a difference in feeling of the car,
huge,
Oh,
the
yeah.
rigidness
Yeah.
of the car.
And just
Like-
safety.
Like I
Yeah.
remember it was Mark Presley. He used to be a mechanic at McLaren in the 2000s. Raikkonen was there. It was around Monaco. I think it was 2006. And Raikkonen was saying all weekend, the car doesn't feel right, car doesn't feel right, car doesn't feel right. There has to be a crack in it, right? And all weekend, all the mechanics, engineers are like, no shot there's a crack in this chassis. It's perfect, right? Sure enough, after the race back in, I think they're in Woking, right? They take apart the car and chassis cracked. Like drivers
Damn.
have that much feel, and it matters so much to them in the car.
Yeah, well-
that those kind of things matter.
Well, that's why, and kind of getting into the race weekend, that's why Thursday when Logan Sargent had his crash in FP1, a lot of like the initial commentary was that Logan, or was there something with the car that's not 100% right? Because when you're repairing a chassis, it's
Totally
never
true.
going to be perfect. It's never
Yeah.
going to be good as new. They're repairing something that was broken. So, and then also it's like that thing where it's like he just crashed and you're like, frick, are they going to have to...
Well,
like,
according
fix it
to
again?
Twitter notes, that crash was his fault and not the car's fault. So
I'm
glad Elon cleared that up.
I think there's.
Thank you, Elon. Thank you.
I think looking at the onboard, it's pretty clear that he just.
Yeah,
it's so easy. He just lost it. He put a tire in the grass and it was over.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's no saving it.
And that was about
but
I think my 10 cents on the situation is completely relating to what Jason said. We talk all the time about what these drivers have to go through in a race, like in terms of their body and like, G-forces. The car has to do that too. You know what I mean? And if they're like fundamentally, it's such a weird comparison, but if I had a broken arm or something like that and I'm trying to drive a race car, it's basically the same comparison of like, if there's a crack in the chassis, then that car is not going to perform. It's not going to do what it needs to do.
Yeah.
So that's a major deal. That's just crazy though. It's like I said, heading back to exactly what I started this conversation with, the fact that they are in risk of not running 2 cars in China is crazy.
Yeah.
It's nuts to me.
Yeah. It's crazy. I definitely think that it's a big issue, and like we were kind of talking about before, it's also going to affect their ability to bring upgrades.
Yeah.
And a midfield that is so there's no back of the pack anymore. It's just that bottom of the midfield that is so tight.
Yeah.
If they can't bring upgrades, people are going to move on without them, and they're going to end up like potentially like even behind Alpine. I mean, that's who they were fighting with this weekend.
Haas P8.
Yeah.
It's on. I mean, best result since like 2018. I'm super excited for that.
Well, it's them and the RBs are fighting for like that spot. And then everybody else is just
Yuki Tsunoda has been killing it. I think he's he's finishing the points every race this year, or 2 out of 4.
2 out of 4 or something. 3 out of 4. I don't
he's
think
been
it's every
insane
race.
in that RB.
No, he's been really good. Just before we kind of move on to qualifying, FP2 was a washout, and the most notable from Friday was that Aston Martin broke curfew. There's no penalty, but like they broke curfew to fix, not to fix, but to bring upgrades to Alonso's car.
Interesting.
And that just means what, the garage was closed and they were like still working on it? Or?
There's a curfew. Like you can only be in the paddock until like I want to say it's like 10 p.m. or 11 p.m.
Okay.
It depends on what time the sessions are at.
Those rebellious teens.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's their bedtime.
It's kind of, I think it's just to avoid overworking of crew and
Oh,
mechanics.
for sure.
You don't want them there till like 4 a.m. and then have to be back at like 9 a.m. Like it's a balance. But they did break curfew to put those upgrades on Alonso's car, which paid off because Lance Stroll said he was driving a car from another category down the streets, which was so funny.
Poor guy.
Anyways, I actually, like moving into qualifying, I actually named Q1 Taking a Stroll because Lance Stroll did not make Q2 out in Q1. He was the most notable. I think everybody else is kind of predictable. And George and Oscar, they tangled like 4 times this weekend.
They did.
They were beefing.
They were under investigation. George was under investigation by the stewards twice this weekend. Firstly, in qualifying, unsafe release, nothing. And also
I thought that was a
post-race.
fine, no?
Is there a fine for that? I don't think there was.
There might have been. I saw something about a fine.
There was no racing penalty for it. There may have been a fine.
How the turns have tables.
It would be a Mercedes fine, not a George fine.
Mm-hmm.
How the turns
Can
have
I think my one takeaway, this is such a minor thing to like talk about.
5,000 euros.
For the team?
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
But Zhou Guanyu might be the worst qualifier in the grid.
He might actually
I think
be worse
he's
than
been
Logan
P20 like besides like I think didn't Stroll wreck in
Pierre.
qualifying and Pierre and stuff like that?
Pierre's been consistently bad, but he like this year, but he's not usually that bad. It's
yeah.
just, that car is
it
so
the
bad.
stake car just doesn't have the speed in qualifying?
No,
is it
because Valtteri was in
fine.
Q2.
Yeah, he does pretty okay. Zhou is just terrible in qualifying.
I
don't get it.
I think it's dancing. Qualifying is dancing a fine line between, especially in Suzuka, between what is too much and what is the right amount.
Yeah.
And I think Valtteri is able to find, with his experience, is able to find that limit just a bit easier than Zhou is. Like he just can't push it enough to where you're through, but not enough to where you're not in the wall.
That's
because
fair.
we saw this weekend, it's a very fine line.
It is.
And he's fine in the races. Like his pace is fine, but like it's just maybe it's one of those deals where like he literally gets more comfortable in the race because lap after lap after lap, you're like, all right, I'm in my groove. You know what I mean?
Think, and I said this too in our group chat, like after qualifying, it was kind of like if you look at the qualifying order, it's almost like it was which drivers are the best at putting it together when you don't have much running.
Right.
The drivers that usually do the best in a sprint race scenario, for example, are those that did the best here because FP2 was a washout. It rained right before, it rained at the very early time of the session, and then like most cars didn't go out or went out for like a couple laps at the very, very end. So the teams that were able to kind of pick up the scraps and still set up a car to the best of their ability without that long running that they could have done in FP2, but also the drivers that can go without that extra practice session and still be okay, were those that I think did the best. And in this scenario, Joe, when you just Valtteri has the experience to do that. But
totally fair.
I think the most notable part of qualifying, and the thing that everybody kept talking about, was Daniel Ricciardo out-qualified by Yuki once again. He's not having an easy time with that car, and I feel so bad for him, but it is what it is.
It is what it is.
He supposedly has the same car. So
I'm not.
I don't know.
I think they do. I don't know.
I think they do.
They totally
no
do.
Shot.
The conspiracies.
There's no shot they'd give Yuki a better car than Daniel Ricciardo. Sorry, and no hate to Yuki fans or anything out there, but with the love for Daniel Ricciardo that is not only in the paddock, in the Red Bull family, for F1 fans in general, there's no way they're going to give him a worse car. They are actually going to give him a better car because I think he's getting the new chassis that's coming, the upgrades before Yuki. I was going to say Logan. LOL. Anyways, he was, but it was much closer than it has been. If you look back, I think it was 2-3 tenths at every race so far. 0.055 was the difference between P10 and P11.
I don't know why people are freaking out so much that Ricciardo didn't make the final qualifying and Yuki did, because they were like
Yuki
that
had an
close, like you
exceptional
said.
lap to
Like
make
they
it
were
into
like
Q3.
this close. If it was 9th and 10th, nobody would be saying anything.
No.
But since Ricciardo got eliminated and Yuki did, everybody flipped out.
What's the storyline?
Kind of talking
Yeah,
about
it's a
like
storyline.
even in Q3 was like the difference between Carlos Sainz in P4 and Charles Leclerc in P8 was a tenth of a second.
Yeah.
That was the difference between those two teammates' laps.
Yeah.
And that's 4 positions.
Yep.
So we talk about new regs being into effect and Max being born, whatever. Max took pole by 0.066 from Sergio Perez.
Perez had a great weekend.
Perez had a great weekend. I don't say that lightly, and I don't usually.
I mean, the driver of the day
fan,
also did a good job too.
He sure did.
Leclerc, absolutely.
I don't know how he got driver of the day.
Here's what I want to know: what would happen? Do we think if Yuki and like Daniel switched cars? Like, how much better would Yuki be? Do we think?
They'd be the same.
Yeah, I don't think they're that different. No.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think maybe with the experience that Yuki has in that seat, maybe he has some setup advantages, some long-term things. Maybe the team knows what he likes a little better to set it up for the race before they even get there. Who knows?
Some teams will share setup. Like, I heard a lot when Sainz went to Ferrari, he would sometimes just default
to Leclerc setup.
To Leclerc setup. Or like when Perez went there, Albon went there. Albon had no clue how to set up the Red Bull.
He was such a rookie.
So he just would use Max's
He would
car.
use his Max's setup.
In cases where drivers are like way closer, they're not going to share setups. Like Hamilton and Rosberg were not sharing setups.
No, those two sides of the garage were probably just as angry and fighting with each other as the drivers were.
Some drivers would like fake setups. Like I heard back in time in history, like drivers who would just make all weird tricks. Was it Heinz-Harald Frentzen? Shoot, there's a really good story where he would literally feed him fake setup information. And it was
so
like
funny.
ridiculous stuff.
We got set up just information in F1.
He got set up with the wrong setup. That's what happened.
Yeah.
He got set up.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, Max did take pole, like we said, from Sergio Perez. Lando had a great lap, but he wasn't happy with it, which I thought was interesting because he was P3.
Yeah. Well, as a McLaren fan, we are getting to a point where we'd like to see him get better than P3.
Yeah, I get that.
P3 is good, but...
Yeah, I thought it was funny how nobody seemed to be able to find the answers. It was like Alonso was like, we're a tenth and a half off P4. That's what his race engineer told him. He was like, I honestly don't know where to find it. I thought that was a good lap. Like, I don't get it. And then Lewis is like, his engineer goes, that's half a second off for Verstappen. He goes, what? Where? There's no, I don't understand where this is coming from.
Yeah.
Charles is faster.
Charles' race engineer goes, that's P7. He goes, it's the best I can do. Honestly, I don't get it. Like, the drivers just, several of them, they just didn't understand what was going on. They were like, I feel like this is a great lap, but it's not corresponding to lap time. So
well, I think it's legit just a case of just car being better than car.
Probably.
I think
Quick
that's
shout
probably
out
what
to
it is.
Alonso going P5 when his teammates like
P16.
Yeah. So good job on
But
him.
I think that's a good job to Alonso, but also that's a bit of a pat on the back to the mechanics and all the engineers at Aston Martin. They were able to pull off an upgrade on that car, a setup change on that car, everything that was perfect. Yep. I mentioned, Lance Stroll, he literally said, he was like, I feel like I'm driving a car from another category. Like, down the straights, we're so slow. But Alonso didn't have that same problem. In fact, as we kind of move into the race, at the end of the race, Alonso was giving DRS to Oscar Piastri so he wouldn't get overtaken himself by George Russell, taking a play out of Carlos Sainz's playbook.
2023 Singapore Grand Prix.
Yes, absolutely. So, the Aston Martin had pace with the new car. And unlike Williams, they are not at all strapped for cash. So within the regulations and within the cost cap, they should be able to bring that same set of upgrades and set up to Lance Stroll's car next week or 2 weeks from now, which is so sad. And Max agrees. But anyways, Alex Albon and Daniel Ricciardo crash 1. How do we feel about that? Do you think it was a racing incident, or do you think somebody is at fault?
Definitely a racing incident, in my opinion. I mean, I think in all aspects, I know we were talking about before the show that, Danny Rick I think he got squeezed, but then also Lance Stroll was in his blind spot. Yeah. I mean, there wasn't really a whole lot he could do in that situation, I don't think, going into that corner.
It was a tight corner to be going
he was trying to get
there.
back to the racing line. Yeah. And Albon just snuck it up on the inside where he didn't expect it. A totally racing incident.
I agree.
Only way you could avoid is if you got, those blind spot detection things?
Oh my God.
It blinks orange on the mirror. He needs a couple of those.
That would be so cool if F1 actually had that, though.
They actually changed, this had to be 2021, 22. They changed the mirror size regulations where they had to be bigger. The mirrors used to be smaller. You go back 2016, the mirrors were way smaller than they were today.
Yeah.
So
listen, dare I talk about spotters again?
Oh, talk about it, Tristan. Talk about it.
That could have solved this situation potentially.
That's the truth.
But would they have been quick enough?
I know. Yeah, that's the thing. It's really tough
because in over racing moves are a lot longer.
Yep. That's and again, like I was saying, that corner was so tight, and the straightaway in general barely fit 3 cars 3 wide.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is,
it prevents the driver from having to look back. Even in long sweeping turns when they're side by side. I mean, IndyCar uses spotters on road courses too, and so does NASCAR. I think it would be fun to see F1 try it out.
Interesting to try it. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going.
I mean, you already have the race engineer, but they don't do active spotting. They're not always.
The one thing I could say is, even if it's not practical during race day, if they could just have them during practice and stuff like that, when we see all these problems of engineers 10 minutes late to tell them oh yeah, Max is on a flying lap right behind you. Come on.
We've seen so many incidents.
But circling back, I think it was a racing deal. I mean, you even look at the tape. They don't seem like they're mad at each other. More mad with themselves, maybe.
Yeah.
So
I think it was a case, and I think Daniel said put it well. He was like, Alex had such a good exit out of turn 2. Or turn 1, turn 2, that he was just naturally faster. Yeah. And so when he was trying to kind of come up, take the racing line kind of out the outside, and Daniel was so focused on Lance on the inside to the left, you can clearly see it. And even I thought it was interesting. Yeah. And the commentators seemed very impressed that when you were at the cool down room, Max was so easily able to spot that on the onboard footage. He was like, wait, but he was looking at Lance on the inside. Yeah. So they just didn't see each other. Like I said, it was Alex was in Daniel's blind spot, and that just caused the crash. But I do want to talk about this kind of in relation to just Suzuka and crashes. This week was the 10-year anniversary of Jules Bianchi's crash. And that death, and I think it just shows how far F1 has come.
Oh, for sure.
In terms of safety. They asked the drivers about it. Carlos seemed like that was his big thing. He was like, we need to praise the FIA because luckily it hasn't happened again.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the most important thing. Yeah. But if you want to know more about that was this week's Fun Fact Friday, which isn't a fun fact, but it is a fact.
It was really cool to see Charles wear Bianchi's helmet.
Tribute
helmet. I mean, they're really, really, really close friends. And that was tough. It was so impressive. After he won at Spa and then he won at Monza, people asked him, what was the better win? It had to be your first win, right? He's like, actually, my first win, it never really registered because I was thinking about
Antoine Hubert.
Yeah, Antoine Hubert.
Yeah.
So like you think back to the impact that these kind of deaths have in motorsport. You know, it's really great to see that the FIA has taken great steps. Actually, the current team principal of Racing Bulls, Laurent Mekies, he used to be at the FIA, and he helped get the wheels moving for the Halo to be introduced before he came into F1 in 2019 as a team boss.
Well, if you think about it, like if we had the Halo back in 2014, chances are Jules would have been racing in F1 right now.
It's
or
crazy.
at least for a lot longer time. And they asked kind of the drivers, which I thought was interesting in the press conference post race. It was like, do you think about these kind of things? Like you're at the race, do you think about the scariness of F1, like how dangerous it actually is? And Max was like, if I let myself think about it, if any of us let ourselves truly think about it, none of us would go out on track. It's dangerous. It is. But you could also go and slip in the shower, which I think that's exactly what he said, and break your neck. So
there's always a risk.
There's always a risk.
Well, here's actually a thing I wanted to touch on. I'm kind of glad that you brought that back up because I think one of the hardest things with this crash between Alex Albon and Denny Rick is that you're going to have to test me on this, but I believe it was Ayrton Senna that said, if there's a gap, go for it.
It was like if you no longer go for a gap that exists, you're no longer a racing driver.
So that's like the hardest ethical decision I feel like to make in racing. And you said it, like he had a gap there and he had that run. So you either as a race car driver have to be like, well, okay, I have this run. What do I do with it? Do I go through with it? Am I gonna push myself and try and get through? Or am I gonna realize maybe I shouldn't do this and back out?
And I think it comes a bit with maturity and with the confidence in your own car. So in that situation, I think there's definitely ran through Alex's mind, like if I don't do this now, I might never be able to get past him.
That's the hardest thing.
Whereas if you look at, like, for example, Max last year in Australia, in the beginning of the race, he was overtaken by the Mercedes, and back in, say, that was 2023, back in 2021, he would have never let it happen. They probably would have collided. It would have been a thing, but he had the confidence in his car to know that he could overtake them on track. So he let it go. He let them pass. He took his time. He was patient. He made the overtake later on and still won the race. But that comes with a little bit more maturity. That comes with confidence in your car that you are going to be able to pass on track. And I think the better the cars get, the less we're going to see these kind of crashes. And the better the drivers get, the less we're going to see these kind of crashes. So
bouncing back just real quick, Jason mentioned it in a second there. It's like these incidents, when they do happen, unfortunately, like with Jules' death, like they transcend boundaries in the racing world. Like it really does. And it's for every sport. But it's kind of crazy is I remember, like I don't remember, I wasn't alive obviously, but when Ayrton Senna passed away, Dale Earnhardt Sr. won a race that weekend, and he, like, in victory lane was just as somber. He was like, I'm just thinking about Ayrton Senna. Like, I could show you guys. It's actually really interesting because I don't know if you knew that he respected Ayrton Senna so much. The NASCAR community really respected Ayrton. But, no, it's, again, I don't want to continue to talk about a tragedy, but it is really incredible how far these cars have advanced.
I keep seeing the videos on my TikTok that's like that song, like Standing in the Light of Your Halo, and it's a picture of Jules, and then it's a picture of all the drivers that have inevitably had crashes that the Halo saved their life. It saved Charles's life on a number of times, the Halo, and I think that it's something we should talk about, and it's something that I think doesn't get as much attention. And we talk about the tragedy, but we don't talk about what happened after that. And that is inevitably, like for that crash, it was the Halo, and luckily enough, that is the last F1 death we've ever had. Obviously, we have 2 to 3 motorsport deaths usually a year.
It's a dangerous thing.
It is.
We talk about it's a dangerous
These guys
sport.
they're gladiators going to battle. With a machine that's literally a death trap. I mean, like, you know, not in a, you know what I mean, right? It's like when you're going 200 miles per hour, what's going to stop? There's very small things that can really prevent you from surviving a crash at that speed. You know what I mean? So
I don't like I don't want to bring it back up, but I just can't stop thinking about rallycross.
No, that's another one, man.
Right.
Yeah, geez, because then you have to contend with nature.
Like you're legit going as fast as you can in the tiniest little
on
trail.
the side of a mountain. Like, you know what I mean?
It's insanity.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But anyways, let's talk about the aftermath of that crash, but in racing terms, not in a bigger picture. The red flag, And the choices that a lot of teams made in that red flag will ultimately determine the outcome of the race.
Yep.
Mercedes deciding to restart on hards, which defined the rest of their race, and ultimately kind of a split. Russell didn't seem too unhappy with it. Lewis was furious. He on the radio, he was fuming. He was like, "You guys are retards. What are we doing? We need to switch strategies." But at that point, it was too late. If he had pitted, he probably would have ended up out of the points because he was P9 as it was.
Yeah, no, it hurt. It hurt. Well, Hamilton 7th and Russell 9th for qualifying, so they just swapped places.
Yeah.
Really weird, really strange. They gained nothing or lost nothing as a team.
Yeah.
But Hamilton struggled and Russell excelled on those guys.
Yeah, Mercedes' saving grace right now is that Lance Stroll hasn't been ultimately that consistent, because if Lance Stroll was scoring consistent points with Fernando Alonso outscoring both Mercedes pretty consistently, it would have been a different question.
I'm pretty sure
it would have jumped them in the championship.
I'm pretty sure Alonso, when he's asked about Mercedes, he said, "Mercedes are behind us right now. Why would I go there?" So,
absolutely,
it's actually true.
It is very true.
Yeah.
I feel like I think we probably talked about it a little bit, but I feel like the George Russell Lewis Hamilton situation is another type of situation, but almost like reminiscent of Danny Rick and Yuki.
Yeah.
I think on a different scale, of course. But yeah, I mean, it just feels like George Russell is just outdoing Lewis again, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's become quite common, and every time I hear it, I kind of go back to what it was like, well, he had that time at Williams where he really had to overperform a underperforming car.
Yeah.
And for so long, Lewis has been in the situation where he is, yes, he's had to kind of overperform, but in a car that's already performing very well.
Right.
When you had these kind of spectacular victories over his teammate, it was because he was driving a good car very well.
Yeah.
So I think it does give George a bit of an edge, but also just simply, I mean, after so long of this car not performing to the standards that Mercedes have set for themselves, I feel like it's just Lewis at this point. Like,
it's definitely throwing them off.
Every time I see it, where it's like Lewis finished P9, Carlos was on the podium. What is Ferrari doing? I'm sorry. It doesn't make any sense. And I think that that's something that come the end of the year, depending on how the kind of the championship plays out and how the rest of the races plays out, they might be kind of kicking themselves. Like, taking this guy that's kind of at the end of his career, whereas Carlos seems to be at the peak of his career.
Yeah.
I think as much as Carlos is doing a great job, he's going to have trouble finding a top seat because Sergio Perez is also performing very well.
Yeah.
And like we mentioned last week, Toto Wolff still has that kind of thing where it's like, I didn't take Max when I could have. I don't think he wants to leave Kimi Antonelli kind of hanging, let's say.
Yeah, he doesn't want to make the same mistake twice.
Exactly.
He'll be in a Williams, but that's for another
that's shocking to me.
That would be awful if he ended up in a Williams and ended up with like
Kimi Antonelli. No, Kimi Antonelli.
Oh, Kimi.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Not
No, that makes sense. I was like, Sainz in a Williams is crazy.
Yeah, no.
But Williams are not, despite all their issues, they're not the worst team on the grid, because that would be the Alpines, who actually collided with each other on the restart, which caused them both to lose. I didn't really catch it during the race because it was just like the Alpines are bad. What's new?
Yeah, what's
new? But Jack Doohan was on the post-race show with Will Buxton. He was saying, yeah, they both had a loss in downforce due to that crash with each other.
Collision.
Like, they hit each other on the restart, and they both suffered the consequences. So
yeah. What are you gonna do?
Stake again losing out double. They had a DNF with Zhou Guanyu on lap 13 with a gearbox issue, and when they had the second set of pit stops, 5 cars in at the same time, they lost out big time with Valtteri Bottas. It's another slow stop.
How long was it? Do we know the number?
I think it was only 8 seconds this time.
All right, well, that's a big improvement from like 50.
Yeah, well, I think they went from like 50 to 25 to 8.
Yeah,
so maybe next week they'll go to 4.
It's,
making progress.
We'll see.
Practice makes perfect.
But that pit stop ultimately also let Yuki score points at his home race, which is
how kind of them.
Amazing.
How kind.
Yeah, which is great. I love nice. Yuki, like we said, is performing amazingly.
He is.
Highlight of the race, Charles Leclerc pulling off the one stop was incredible.
Yep.
Great drive.
I don't know when it dawned on me that it was like, I think it was when Max pitted and Charles stayed out for like 3-4 laps. I was like, I think he's doing the one stop. He drove a great race. Ultimately,
he made it work. He gained places. I mean, driver of the day, very well deserved. He really
P8 to P4 is amazing.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, ultimately, the better strategy was Carlos Sainz's and pretty much everybody else's 2-stop. But he's still over Carlos in the championship. Yes, Carlos missed a race and is only 4 points behind his teammate, but I think starting 8th, finishing 4th when your teammate started, he started 4th. He started 4th, finished 3rd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, ultimately, yeah. But I think that's all the race talk. Oh. I do want to mention that Penelope was indeed at the race again with Kelly.
Oh, she redeemed herself.
And the cutest thing ever. And I heard there was an interview with Viaplay in Dutch that I had to translate, which was not the funnest thing to do this morning, but I really wanted to know what he said because I heard Kelly and I was like, I wonder what he said. Anyways, Max was saying that Kelly was really happy that he was able to pull off the win because she didn't want Penelope to feel like she was bad luck.
That's what I'm saying. She redeemed herself.
She redeemed herself on the luck.
Yeah.
And if you watch the podium, you can hear her yelling Maxie. Because I think the camera might have been like right next to her, so you could pick it up a little bit.
She single-handedly might bring Max favor with the fans. With the non-Red Bull fans, she might because that's adorable.
Well, it's like what,
so
Steph Curry's daughter when she was in the press
Oh
conference,
Yeah.
But the thing, oh man, I don't want to lose. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. Speaking of that, did y'all see the little kid like during George Russell's press?
That was so cute.
It's just a guy just like George.
Yeah, no, but did you also see that there was George took a photo with a young little kid. He must have been 2 or 3 years old, and Lewis was the one that took the photo.
No,
and
that's what I'm talking about. I think it's the same guy.
Yeah. George posted it.
Yeah.
And he goes like, this kid single-handedly saving my day or something like that. I have to see exactly what the caption was, but it was something along those lines.
His pose was cracking me up. He was just like T-posing on him.
Yeah, it was so cute. It was so cute.
Quick shout out to George Russell. Insane battle at the end there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
With Oscar.
Absolutely.
Oscar or Norris was that, right?
Oscar.
Okay, just making sure I didn't get that wrong.
Yep.
Yeah, because Norris was up with the Ferraris, but not really.
Don't do me like that.
He's only 3 seconds behind Charles at the end.
Yeah, no, that switchback going into the final chicane there was insane. Yeah. I didn't know how he pulled it off, even though there wasn't enough space for both cars go through the corner. Like, magical stuff there from George.
No,
like,
absolutely.
I think he's the most underrated driver on the grid.
I disagree.
But
Who,
yes,
George?
We can disagree.
George is not the most underrated driver on the grid.
I remember
like
Imola when he was chasing down Bottas in the 2021 Mercedes in the Williams. Like, incredible. Like, Bottas should have never been that slow, and Russell should have never been that fast. And lo and behold, he was.
Strictly because of the skill issue in Australia, I don't think he's underrated.
Well, no, he's not. He makes too many mistakes. That's his problem. He's a good racer, but he makes way too many mistakes. Indeed, I think that, they were racing hard, but that incident at the very end with Oscar that was kind of a mistake. I don't think that was extremely intentional. He didn't intend to do that.
I rate him on par with Norris.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
I wouldn't go that far.
I think in terms of talent, in speed, yes, but I don't know if he's...
I disagree. Absolutely.
I don't know how
he's
to put
beating Lewis
it.
Hamilton in the same car.
Yeah.
Is Lewis washed?
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Well, that's the thing,
but,
right?
Okay, you have to think about that.
He's not washed.
Is it... Yeah, you have to think about, is it more George or is it the car?
I think George is in his peak and Lewis is on the downfall.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Also the car.
He needs some Italian speed to get him back up there,
Italian
right?
Jesus.
That's what Italian Jesus. Okay.
The Italian Jesus is Antonio Giovinazzi.
Well, I was going to say, there was that one guy
he's got the hair
talking
for
about.
it.
Yeah. But
yeah, inevitably, all right, Max won the race. But we can, talk about that. And
Well, the thing I'll actually say, though, do you think Marina, George Russell is just a slightly better version of, Lance Stroll?
yes.
Definitely not.
I would agree with that statement.
not.
I think slightly better. He's a better version. But
That's
if
what
I
I'm
had to
saying,
say, George Russell's probably a tier 3 driver, in my opinion. I think tier
I
1
think
is
so.
your
I think he's
Fernando
a high
Alonso's.
tier 3.
No, he's
think-
tier 2 at least.
Let me explain. So I think it's Fernando Alonso, Lewis Hamilton. Your world champions. Max Verstappen is your tier 1. Your tier 2 is your potential world champions. I'm talking Charles Leclerc, maybe Carlos Sainz, Lando
George
Norris.
Russell.
Definitely not George Russell. Your tier 3 is your George Russells, your Danny Ricciardos.
I would not put him in the same space as Danny Ricciardo.
You don't think? Daniel
The
Ricciardo
way
right now.
the way Daniel Ricciardo's performing, he's like top tier 4.
Daniel Ricciardo has
Top
what,
tier 4.
eight wins, right? I think Russell.
Yeah, how many
eclipse
wins
him.
does George Russell have?
I thi-
One?
I think he will. Well, he should have 2, but I think he will get double-digit wins by
I just
the time
think that's
George
up to the
Russell?
car, man.
I
I really
disagree.
do. I don't know
Yeah.
if I have enough faith in
Well,
Mercedes over the next 10 years.
I
but
think
we'll
it's
see.
going to depend a lot on also like who ends up in that second seat with George Russell. Because if
Yeah.
it's Kimi Antonelli, I would feel pretty strongly about the fact that George is able to take him. If he can take Lewis, he can take Kimi.
Absolutely.
Now, if it's Carlos Sainz with the current form of Carlos Sainz, I think Carlos Sainz would outperform George Russell.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
agree.
I put George Russell like high end tier 3, and I would put Lando Norris right there at the bottom of tier 2.
Yeah.
On the fringe of tier 3 if he doesn't get better.
Lando Norris at the bottom of tier 2 for into tier 3.
Yeah, I think so.
I think
And
it's
maybe
car
that's just
dependent.
me.
I think Lando has a history of also being like really hard on himself.
Yeah, well that's what I was gonna
doesn't
say.
help.
Maybe that's just me being a hard ass like McLaren fan and just wanting him to be better than P3. But
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I just think that Lando is definitely much better than George.
I think so.
I think the difference
I think it's
between
closer
a lot
than it's
of
made out to be.
yeah, I
I'll
think
say
the
that.
difference between a lot of the drivers on the grid is ultimately their ability to drive week in, week out without mistakes.
Yeah.
Which is something Max has. I think Lewis had for a very, very long time. He's been making more of them, but I think it's more car dependent than it is Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah.
Fernando Alonso, I don't think 2 weeks ago in Australia was a mistake. I think he did it intentionally, but it wasn't intentionally to crash. It was intentionally to put the moves on George Russell.
Yep.
Which he kind of touched on this weekend when they asked him if he was intentionally giving Oscar Piastri DRS, and he goes, "I'm not going to comment on that because who knows? After Australia, maybe I get disqualified from the whole championship." So
yeah.
I think
Loose
that's
slips sink ships. Don't say
I would
nothing.
Exactly.
I would love to see, and I think the answer would be kind of obvious, but it's still kind of a fun thought project. Switching Lance Stroll and George Russell on cars.
I think Lance would perform.
do
I think
Mercedes.
George would perform better than Lance,
Yeah,
but
I think so too.
you never know.
Yeah, I think
never
it'd be
know.
interesting.
Yep.
Before we wrap up, I want to. Well, I have to get the quote of the day, which probably won't be from this race because I kind of forgot about it. But I want to very quickly touch on a recent interview Will Buxton did on the Red Flags podcast, which, to be fair, is not always my favorite because I do typically prefer.
Shout out Red Flag.
Yeah, I do like their podcast, but they are more of the type that's like more of a joking around kind of setting, which is fun for some fans. I prefer kind of something more along the lines of Beyond the Grid, where I feel like I'm always learning something new.
Yeah, no.
If that's fair, and maybe that's why people don't like our podcast. Who knows? But
Hey.
Hey, we share
taking
a lot of
We didn't
knowledge.
deserve a stray there. What was that?
who knows? I mean, everybody is entitled to their
Nah, yeah,
opinion
different
about
strokes for
whatever.
different
But
folks. That's
I did really enjoy that podcast and that interview, and I think one of the biggest things I took away from it was like Will Buxton, his like first year in F1, he was following them around in a caravan. Like, didn't even have enough money to eat. Like, it was either food or gas.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
I thought that was like a big thing, and also like the way he got his start. Like, he doesn't have any professional training in journalism, so I think that's just a big thing. And I kind of wanted to like kind of shout it out to anyone who is potentially thinking of doing a podcast like we are, where it's like you don't have to be perfect,
No.
and you don't have to know everything. You can be a new fan, you can be an old fan. I think it's just important to everybody to know, like, you could do what you want. Like, if you want to start a podcast about F1, go for it.
Oh yeah.
So
Little
yeah,
motivation
that was little-
for our Sunday
little
here.
motivation.
Wow.
Motivation.
Well, actually, this is gonna be coming out on Monday, right? So motivational
Yes.
Monday.
Motivational
Oh, there you go.
Monday.
Motivation Monday, baby.
Peace and love.
Actually, I did have a quote. I'm so smart.
I have a
Marina,
quote.
Marina
She's so
thought of
smart.
it in advance.
This is what makes us better than our podcast.
Exactly.
I think that this quote of the day might be slightly predictable.
Oh, boy.
So we'll see. Oh, wait, predictable
You
as in
say
like I
that,
think you can
but-
tell who it is. What is this, a tractor? This is unacceptable. Remember what's happened. I can't believe this.
I feel like that's like George Russell.
Nope.
No.
Recent?
Yes,
Lewis
last year.
wouldn't say that.
The tractor.
I can see
Is
Max
it
saying
Max
that.
from Singapore?
No.
Whoa.
It's this race. It's Japanese Grand Prix.
Oh.
Japanese Grand Prix from last
Charles?
year.
Not Charles.
Who had a
You're getting
bad
closer.
race?
Oh.
Was it Alonso? No.
No.
Okay. I don't think he would say that.
I could see Lando saying
I'll give you a hint. He's talking about a tractor. So he's talking about, do we not remember what happened with Jules?
Is this Martin Brundle?
No.
Oh.
It's a racer.
Oh, then it must be, okay,
he raced
Carlos
last
Sainz
year. No.
Who was passing the tractor at that moment? Because Carlos Sainz, that's why the tractor was out.
Yeah, it was not Carlos Sainz, but it was due to Carlos Sainz's incident.
There's somebody passing the tractor. Was it Yuki Tsunoda?
No.
Albon?
We're just going down the list now.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have no clue.
I thought this would be a lot more obvious.
I don't know who's passing the tractor at
He has the right moment. Jason knows exactly what it was.
Mm-hmm. Lewis Hamilton?
No.
Oh my God. Is it George?
I already said
No.
George.
I already said George.
Do you want me to tell you?
Yeah.
No.
Go ahead.
One more guess.
Last guess, he's French.
Alex
Pierre?
Yes.
Oh.
Hell yeah, dude.
Pierre Gasly.
What were you gonna say?
All we do
I
is
don't know why
win,
I was
baby.
gonna say that. I
Dub
don't know.
Nation. That's what we do.
It only took y'all like 100
baby.
guesses. You went all the way down the grid.
First time, baby. First time.
yeah,
That's what it's all about.
first
That's what we're looking
time.
for.
Took one guess. That's all it was.
All right,
We'll edit
podium
it out.
predictions for China.
China. Joe Guanyu, first
may I
win.
may I remind you that China is a sprint race.
Ah.
It's also the first time we've been in China in 4 to 5 years, which Max Verstappen made
excited.
sure to complain about in this week's press
I
conference.
don't want to go to China.
No, he just, and I agree with him, and Carlos Sainz agreed with him as well. It was like, why would you put a sprint race on a track that we haven't been to with these set of regulations where we're going to have one practice session to get it right? Do you want us all to crash into each other?
Yes.
Yeah, bowling.
Basically,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like a
It's
bowling ball.
content, baby.
Exactly.
That's not good. That
No,
paints
like-
FIA
like
so
seriously.
poorly in
They
the
get
F1.
shut
so
down.
poorly.
They don't want crashes per
No,
se.
they want it to be
want
close.
weird action. They want to see somebody
Weird
shaken up.
action.
Yeah, like
But
if
that,
nobody
sure.
knows what they're doing, then obviously one team's gonna guess right and other teams are gonna guess horribly wrong.
Yeah.
So it's gonna shake up the grid.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
We'll see.
So
It'll be
top 3. I guess we got to throw a wild card in there at some point, right? I'm going to have Max taking it. P2, Oscar Piastri.
Interesting.
I'm going to think for some reason he's going to be a sprint race king.
Watch out, Lando.
And then P3, it's going to be a Ferrari. I'm going to go with Sainz.
Oh yes.
I'm going to go with Sainz.
When was
ready.
the last Chinese Grand Prix?
2019.
Okay. That helps my
Who
prediction.
won it?
Go for it.
in that year.
I'm going with
I don't know
again,
who
a
won,
Max
probably.
win.
Max
I'm
win.
going Science P2
Okay.
and I'm going Norris P3.
Interesting.
Classic.
I'm excited.
All right.
Lewis
Steven?
Hamilton won that race.
Oh, I really don't
Good
want
to
to say
know.
Max again, but I feel obligated
They
to
did
at
a
this
great
point.
double stack that year. Mercedes.
It hurts my heart to say Max winning again. It really does. Just for the sake of
Ricardo's won
different-
here, 2018.
Yeah.
That was insane.
yeah. I'm
2018?
just
I see Ricardo
2017?
points. I
18,
think
yep.
with
18,
a
okay.
sprint race. Well, finish your prediction and then I'll say what I think.
Probably Max Verstappen 1, unfortunately. 2. I do like the Piastri pick. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know what? I'll go Piastri 2.
Okay.
Piastri.
3.
Pastry. He's a
Pastry.
pastry.
Piastri pastry.
Pastor Piastri.
All right.
And 3, I'll just go Carlos Sainz. Yeah.
Here's where my prediction is definitely going to differ from all of yours.
Oh,
and that
boy.
is because I think that any driver who was at their current team in 2019 is going to have a slight advantage.
That makes sense.
Being that, like, Checo has never raced there in a Red Bull. So I don't think it will be his strongest of weekends.
Yeah.
But
Dude, you're going Charles,
with his...
aren't you?
Yes, I am. Well, I'm going Max. I'm going Max and then Charles.
Okay.
And then probably like a Lando Norris or Fernando Alonso.
I could see experience being really important. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see
I
Fernando.
see Lewis having a good race, but yet again, last time I said Lewis was going to have a good race, I actually put him on the podium for Australia. He DNF'd, so maybe I should say that a little louder. Lewis Hamilton is going to have a great race, guys.
Say
Great
it loud
race.
for the people in the back.
Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. We really appreciate it. If you made it this far, don't forget to check out our Instagram and TikTok at
Follow
Lights
us.
Out Latest.
Whoa.
That was so
We're
creepy.
getting ASMR here.
We have Tech
Damn it,
Tuesday,
well.
Wag Wednesday, Throwback Thursday, Fun Fact Friday, Man on the Street videos, which were really funny this week, if I may say so myself, and of course podcast clips and the podcast podcast every Monday at 11:30 Eastern Time. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye, guys.
Like and subscribe.